Good morning and welcome everybody to this session. And thank you, Prakyat Bhai. This was a really excellent prelude to the topic. I hope to do something to justify that now. Could you please once again sing the same song after? Thank you. Over the last 2 months, we've been discussing the theme of approaching God. How do we approach God? We can only approach God through spiritual practice, through spiritual discipline. As we already heard, there are many different types of spiritual disciplines, but among the major disciplines, prayer, worship, and meditation are the 3 most important ones. These are so closely related to one another that, at least in our tradition, they're often practiced simultaneously. In the 2 earlier talks of this series, we studied the first and second parts of the subject, approaching God through prayer and approaching God through worship. Today we take up the third and concluding part, approaching God through meditation. Ever since information about yoga and Vedanta became easily available to the wider world, meditation has enjoyed immense popularity. What once used to be a purely spiritual practice, which was restricted to a small number of fairly qualified aspirants, it is now being practiced by large numbers of people and applied to a wide variety of human situations. Meditation techniques have become so diverse that the word meditation is now a generic term denoting several different forms of concentration rather than a specific spiritual discipline. The various types of meditation that are now current all over the world, we can divide them into 2 broad groups, secular and spiritual. We have meditation for health, meditation for relaxation, meditation to reduce hypertension, mental tension, meditation to cure psychosomatic disorders. Meditation has become a boon to countless people in our stressed out modern world. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with practicing meditation for its therapeutic benefits. But that is not all that meditation means or can do. There is a lot more to it. Here we are concerned with real meditation, whose aim is spiritual illumination. This kind of spiritual meditation requires a much higher degree, a much higher quality of concentration. And it may not necessarily be a relaxing experience, especially for a beginner. Let us remember, dhyana in Patanjali's graded scheme of yoga is only the last but one of 8 steps. It is only to be expected that for people like us, that kind of higher spiritual meditation entails much effort, struggle, and strain. It's a long process and demands great patience and perseverance. Now, there is a good deal of ignorance about the nature of this real meditation. We have the mistaken notion that meditation is nothing but a form of concentration. We all have the capacity to concentrate our mind on something or other. And it is with this confidence that we attempt to meditate. But when we find that we can't, we are surprised. Why am I not able to meditate? Because meditation is not just an ordinary type of concentration. This we need to understand. It is important to know the difference between ordinary concentration and real meditation. In ordinary concentration, the mind is focused either on an object outside or on an idea or image within. This kind of concentration, which we have done all our lives, is a natural process. As it says in the Kathopanishad, Paranchikhani vyatrinat swayambhu tasmat parang pashyati nantaratman. The Supreme Lord inflicted an injury upon the sense organs in creating them with outgoing tendencies. Therefore, one perceives only outer objects with them and not the Atman within. But Kaschid dhira pratyagatmanamaikshat avritta chakshuhu amritatvamichan. But a calm person, wishing for immortality, beholds the Atman within with eyes closed. So, we have no difficulty in concentrating on external things, but real meditation is a complete reversal of that process. The mind is turned back upon its source. It brings to mind Sri Ramakrishna's analogy of the police sergeant. The police sergeant does his rounds in the dark with a lantern in his hand. The lantern has dark glass on three sides, and only the front is transparent. With that light, he can see others, but they can't see him unless he turns the lantern towards himself. In the same way, with the light of the mind, we can see external objects or mental images and thoughts. But if we want to perceive God, we must turn the mind back to its source and focus its light inward. That is meditation. So by meditation, we mean dhyana. It is not just ordinary concentration, it is a special type of concentration. It is a fully conscious process which involves concentration on a spiritual idea that presupposes that the meditator is capable of rising above worldly ideas. Another distinctive feature is meditation is done at a particular higher center of consciousness, say the heart or the throat or the point between the eyebrows. Though we try to feel the spiritual heart as our center of consciousness and are sometimes able to hold the mind in that region, we have no idea what that spiritual heart really means because it is as yet dormant or covered. It takes intense spiritual practice, intense prayer, intense concentration supported by strict brahmacharya to awaken that. So it is actually quite an advanced stage that is reached after many long years of hard tapasya. But when an aspirant succeeds in awakening this heart center, Sri Ramakrishna says, I quote, the Kundalini stays there. At that time, the aspirant's mind is withdrawn from the three lower centers. He feels the awakening of divine consciousness and sees light. In mute wonder, he sees that radiance and cries out, what is this? What is this? End quote. So meditation is said to become spontaneous from that stage. A kind of natural interiority comes to the mind as a result of the inward pull that it feels from the awakened heart center. Then the mind comes to rest there, as Sri Ramakrishna says, the Kundalini stays there. The mind comes to rest there and becomes fixed on the object of meditation. Until this stage is reached, meditation is difficult. Anyhow, there is still another feature that distinguishes meditation from ordinary concentration. In ordinary concentration, our sense organs are active and we are still in contact with the external world. But during meditation, which, as we just heard, requires a higher, better degree of concentration, there only the mind is active and contact with the external world is cut off. That is why, according to Patanjali, the aspiring yogi should first be established in pratyahara and dharana before attempting dhyana. Only then is real meditation possible. There are several other major differences. It is all so fascinating, and there is so much to know. So I've said this before and I'll say it once again. Those who are interested, please make it a point to study Bhajananandaji Maharaj's extraordinarily brilliant series of articles on this subject, on the subject of prayer, worship, and meditation as spiritual disciplines. You will find them in our Prabuddha Bharata magazine of 1980. So, what we usually call meditation doesn't really deserve that name. During this so-called meditation, the mind is upset by various thoughts and tendencies. They all turn it away from the contemplation of God. To try again and again to draw this scattered mind inward and fix it on God, which is the case with us, this is called pratyahara, or withdrawal of the outgoing mind. The next stage is to hold the mind in contemplation of the same thought for a short space of time, which is called dharana. And dhyana, or meditation, is when the outgoing tendencies are fully restrained and the mind flows towards God in one continuous current. The concentration of an ordinary person, of a scientist or an artist, of a psychologist or a philosopher, and of a yogi. Judged objectively, all these are different forms of concentration. But seen subjectively, their contents differ very widely and they lead to altogether different results. However, only the concentration of a spiritual aspirant, of a yogi, only that can be called meditation in the real sense. As we just heard, Every average human being has the capacity to practice concentration, though it is usually directed towards persons or objects. So, in order to follow the spiritual life, we don't need to create new faculties all of a sudden. All that has to be done is give the old capacities and tendencies a Godward turn without diminishing their intensity. And then the worldly mind becomes a spiritual mind. But it is not as easy as it sounds. It takes a lot of discipline and mental purification before we can do that successfully. The main problem in meditative life is the lack of mental training. We see that the mind becomes most restless just when we want to calm it. It revolts the very moment we try to restrain it. The more we try to quieten the mind, the stronger the thought waves become. This is the reason why meditation makes us so tired in the beginning instead of soothing us or bringing us the light as it should. So we need a strict discipline in everything we do. We will have to follow a definite system of discipline with great determination in order to break in this mind. If we want to reach the goal someday, we must learn to follow one program, one course definitely, step by step, without vacillating. Proper discipline is essential for all forms of spiritual practice, and without practice, there can never be anything like real meditation. So, the mind is like an unruly horse that has to be tamed. When we want to steady it, it acts in two ways. Either it becomes very restless, or it refuses to budge. In order to establish control over this mind, a certain amount of moral and ethical culture is also necessary. So long as thoughts of pleasure and enjoyment are allowed to dominate it, it is impossible to control the mind. All this implies something important that people usually overlook. Concentration by itself doesn't have any spiritual value. Not only that, it can even be dangerous if we practice too much meditation before having attained a certain amount of mental purification. And if we don't continue the process of sublimation of feelings and desires at the same time. Concentration and meditation become spiritually effective only to the extent the mind is purified. That is to say, cleansed of the dirt of bad impressions and tendencies that we ourselves have allowed to accumulate through our own wrong thoughts and actions. Higher forms of concentration and meditation can be taken up successfully only after the attainment of much purity and detachment. The higher centers of consciousness must first be activated. Otherwise, we won't be able to dwell on higher thoughts for long. And these higher centers won't open up before we have first purified ourselves. To repeat the warning one more time, prolonged concentration can become dangerous and lead to very bad effects without proper preparation for the higher life. Without a certain amount of purification and sublimation of feelings and desires. When we attempt meditation without having accomplished these, we are likely to concentrate more on the impurities of the mind than on God. If we can concentrate our minds but don't know how to handle the mind itself, then the mind will run after all sorts of worldly distractions with an even greater intensity just because it has become concentrated. So, if we don't know how to manipulate the mind, it will lead us astray. That is why the path of Yoga Vedanta stresses ethical disciplines like ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. Disciplines like non-violence, truthfulness, continence, non-covetousness, and all in thought, word, and deed. That is to say, purity in all its aspects, so much. This kind of physical and mental purity is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, it is impossible to concentrate a dirty, restless mind on higher things, nor is it wise to attempt it. Even monastic orders never allow beginners to attempt the path of exclusive meditation. Because so long as aspirants are, aspirants and not masters of their thoughts, too much meditation could be dangerous for them in the early stages. When they are left alone with their inner impurities for too long, there is a definite risk of being overpowered by them. This is where we appreciate the importance of study, service, prayer, and worship. So, in our stage, it is good for us to spend short periods in meditation and use the rest of the time in those basic, foundational spiritual disciplines. Then, when we have followed a strict code of ethics and morals for a sufficiently long time, we can begin with the actual practice of meditation. First, we choose a sitting posture which is both steady and comfortable. Usually it is sitting on the floor cross-legged, for example, in Padmasana, because in this posture the weight of the body is perfectly balanced and bodily distractions are minimized to a great extent. Still, it takes some practice for it to become easy and natural. Then comes rhythmic breathing. This is very helpful because the mind and breath are interrelated and act upon each other. But here it must be said that pranayama is not for busy people with hectic lifestyles. Simple, regulated breathing is good for all, and that is enough for spiritual life. At this point, that is, before we come to actual meditation, Swami Yatishwaranandaji says we may also give strong positive suggestions to our mind intensely, again and again, with every breath. He says, we must feel that with every breath, our body and mind is growing purer, calmer, stronger. We must inhale purity, peace, and strength. Fill ourselves with purity, peace, and strength, and exhale all impurity, disharmony, and weakness. When we practice this intensely enough, after a time, we will begin to notice that we are actually becoming so pure, serene, and strong, and it becomes easier to settle down into a meditative state. Now we can turn our attention to the content of meditation. Many people want to begin spiritual life from the topmost rung of the ladder. Unfortunately, this can't be done. There are no shortcuts or long jumps in spiritual life. and nothing can be achieved without first finding out where one really stands. High flights of philosophy and metaphysics don't mean realization, nor do they lead to it. They just remain abstract speculations that have no connection at all with real life. They don't change our lives in any way. So we should first know where we stand and then proceed from there. We must begin as beginners and try to go forward step by step. As an ideal, Advaita may be all right for us, but when we get down to actual life, we are all dualists and will remain dualists for a long, long time. Nobody who is caught up in duality can be a true Advaitin, however much Advaita may appeal to them. Every now and then we come across people who want to have nothing to do with a personal God. They would rather have this so-called choiceless awareness or contentless meditation, all nebulous terms. They're only interested in the absolute. They have no use for any preparatory disciplines. It is all unnecessary and boring to them. It sounds very, very grand, but when we look at their actions in daily life, we see that they are confirmed dualists where their own egos are concerned. So, their worship of the divine, in spirit and in truth, as they like to describe it, though it is all very well as an ideal, it is just a hazy thing that has no real connection either with spirit or with truth. So for most people, meditation must have some definite positive spiritual content. Otherwise, they may doze off during meditation, or the contentless space within may get filled up with impure thoughts. After all, there is nothing inferior about meditating on God with form and with divine attributes. On the contrary, it is effective in two ways. It leads one away from one's ego, and it sublimates one's feelings. Countless pictures and thoughts arise in the mind and distract us as we try to meditate. These troublesome memories have to be neutralized by thoughts of the divine. We have to powerfully set up the holy form of our Ishtadevata, our chosen deity, against those memories. Those who can do this progress quickly in spiritual life without too much trouble. Those who feel an intense attraction or love for their chosen deities will find meditation easy and enjoyable. This kind of meditation on God is usually done in one of the higher centers of consciousness, in the heart or in the head, generally speaking. For most people, the heart is said to be the safest center to focus their energies. Moreover, the heart center is supposed to be the gateway to superconsciousness. We are instructed to consciously raise our nervous energies from the three lower centers of consciousness. This gradually leads us above all sensuality and establishes our lives firmly on moral and ethical principles. We use the word heart very freely, but what exactly do we mean by it? We point to the heart to indicate our emotions. We say, from the bottom of my heart, this is the emotional heart. Apart from this, there is another spiritual heart. That is, the heart center, the Anahata Chakra of yoga and tantra. It is often depicted as a lotus, the heart lotus. This is said to be the seat of intuition, of higher spiritual consciousness. As you know, in this human body, there are various chakras, centers of consciousness. Each of them is the meeting point of our physical, mental, and spiritual bodies. The three lower centers are connected with our sensual life. The heart center is the fourth. It lies between the three lower and the three higher centers. The heart and the three higher centers are connected with our spiritual life. They are like gateways to different planes of spiritual consciousness. According to Tantra, our latent spiritual power, the Kundalini, was originally located in the Sahasrara, in the crown of the head. From there, it passed down the spinal cord through the Sushumna channel and reached the base of the spine. There it forgot itself, came under the sway of desire, and lost its way back. That is what the Tantrics say. The task in spiritual life is to clear this channel again, raise our consciousness from the lower centers to the higher ones, and recollect and regain our true nature. The heart, which is located in between the lower and the higher centers, is given preference because, it being the first of the higher centers, it is easy to practice meditation there. This is where we first see the light of the Supreme Spirit, who dwells within us as the soul of our soul. It is the special seat of the personal God. So for devotees, it is naturally the best place to meditate. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the landlord may reside in any part of his large estate, but usually you find him in his drawing room. The devotee's heart is God's drawing room, he said. It is there that God's special presence is felt. So, the heart is a sacred place, God's special seat, where He dwells in us as the soul of our souls. Genuine spiritual experiences are said to begin with this center. This is the plane of consciousness where the meditator is blessed with spiritual visions. As we heard Sri Ramakrishna say just a while ago, here he sees the inner light, or the luminous form of his Ishtadevata, of his chosen deity. Such experiences also bring with them the conviction that one is a soul separate from the body. One feels that one is a soul that has put on a pure mental and a pure physical body, and that the Supreme Spirit too has assumed a luminous and blissful form of one's chosen deity in order to bless them. When the devotee succeeds in entering his own spiritual heart, his body consciousness is forgotten, and at least for the time being, he remains conscious of the living, luminous, and blissful presence of the divine. But again, this only happens after years and years of regular meditation. Then the spiritual aspirant develops a subtle sense which enables one to understand the real meaning of the heart center and the significance of meditating there, and also what what divine presence actually means. Now, to express all this concisely, meditation is a method by which the soul contacts God in the heart. When our spiritual consciousness awakens through the practice of meditation, we begin to sense the eternal relationship of the eternal soul with the eternal God. This takes place first in the heart center, in that sacred space within the heart, as the Vedas describe it. The pure space within is part of the infinite space that penetrates and permeates everything, everywhere. But we must not understand it as material space. It is something too subtle to be described. It is a matter of experience. It is the seat of our individual self, which again is an inseparable part of the universal self. The expression space within the heart may give us the idea that it is limited, but that is not really limited. It is the heart as we imagine it that appears to limit it. What appears to be limited is in fact inseparable from the unlimited. It is the one and the same reality beyond all names and forms that manifests itself as both the individual and the cosmic. But we should try to realize all this through meditation. We have to seek it, we have to try to feel it and experience it. We may begin by imagining intensely and vividly the heart as the center of divine consciousness, never forgetting that this divine consciousness that is within is also outside, everywhere, filling and transcending everything. The apparently limited space within cannot exist without infinite space. The individual cannot exist independently. There can't be a wave without the ocean, no ray of light without the sun. They are eternally inseparable. It is this eternal contact between the individual and the universal that has to be experienced in the heart center. When we imagine these things intensely, this body of ours will itself become like a temple of God. Each body is in fact a temple of God. Every heart is a shrine of God. If we take care not to let body consciousness stand in the way, and if we earnestly persist in our meditation, one day we will realize the reality about which we have been imagining for a long time. So now, to put everything that we have heard today in a nutshell, meditation is not just ordinary concentration, it's a special kind of concentration which is the result of moral and spiritual discipline. This is most important. Then, it has a spiritual content, and it is practiced at a particular center of a higher center of consciousness. Finally, it's a direct way to the realization of the soul's union with God. It means, meditation actually means union of the soul with God. However, before we close this topic, approaching God through spiritual discipline, I would like to do a quick review of all three talks so we could go over all the essential points one last time and see how each discipline is related to the others, how one leads to another, the next. prayer, worship, meditation. From today's discussion, it is clear that true meditation is not as easy as it is popularly supposed to be. In the path of bhakti, meditation forms only the third step after prayer and meditation. Ideally, it should be preceded by prayer and worship. It is a fact that those who have practiced prayer and worship for some time find meditation easy and natural. So, how do prayer and worship help the aspirant in the practice of meditation? In the first place, as we saw, meditation is concentration of mind on a higher center of consciousness. And unless that center is to some extent awakened, meditation is difficult. When prayer is practiced with intensity, it is said to quickly awaken the heart center. Concentration is not the main problem in spiritual life. What is really difficult is to give a higher direction to the concentrated energies. A beginner can't do this through meditation alone. Prayer and worship open the higher centers and direct the mind upward. Secondly, meditation is a conscious process. It can be successfully practiced only when it is supported by a pure, calm, strong mind. Through self-analysis or introspection, it is possible to understand the nature of the mind and its workings, but a wayward mind that is enslaved by emotions and instincts cannot be brought under control by self-analysis alone. This is the reason why our meditation very often depends on our moods. If we want to be independent of our moods, we must be able to direct our mind Godward whenever we want. Prayer and worship gradually bring the mind under control. Thirdly, we also saw that meditation becomes meaningful only when there is a living relationship between the soul and God. There may be some rare souls born with an inner sensitivity for the unseen, intangible reality and feel a spontaneous love for God. But for ordinary aspirants like us, the only way is to cultivate devotion through long practice of prayer and worship. Finally, prayer and worship are of help in yet another way. They provide support to the mind even when we are unable to meditate. Sometimes it so happens that we find it just too difficult to meditate. Then we think, instead of wasting my time trying to meditate, let me do some useful work. But no, true devotees don't think that way. They just switch to intense prayer or mental worship, manasa puja. They don't let themselves be discouraged by dryness of mind or any such things. In their case, meditation is only an extension of their prayer and worship. Now, one last question. If meditation is so difficult, does it mean that we can take it up only after becoming adepts in prayer and worship? Well, if an aspirant could devote a few months or even a few years exclusively to prayer and meditation, they would advance quickly and find meditation easy and spontaneous. But it is not necessary even for the beginner to abandon meditation. Meditation, along with prayer and worship, can be practiced even in the beginning of spiritual life. That is what we do. Because meditation, even when not perfectly done, helps us in several ways. First, it helps us understand the workings of our own mind. We gain an understanding of our subtle desires, motives, and tendencies. Then, it gives the mind a good training in inwardness. It introduces a sense of interiority into our spiritual life. Then, it helps us integrate our personality by providing a central inner focus for our thinking, feeling, willing, and actions. That is to say, it unifies all our higher faculties. So these are three of the main advantages of meditation even in the early stages. But when meditation deepens, it becomes a direct means for spiritual experience. Intense, profound meditation at last opens the door to the world of divine light, knowledge, and bliss. Thank you. Yeah, now Prakhyat Bhai will sing that song once again. And after that, we can all join in the basement for some light refreshments. Thank you for coming.